The only way to get comfortable doing it is to just do it and do it and do it.
Yeah.
And after a while, it never gets, completely nonchalant. I'm just going to walk on stage and perform. There's always a little bit of a thrill, but the audience is a little different every time, and that's part of the joy.
This is By Joyan Season 2. I'm your host, Joyan Chan, and every Wednesday we bring you inspiring stories, powerful message, and fun conversations with me and my special guests and friends, and it's my personal mission to empower you to live and lead a life with joy. This podcast is for you if you're looking for more joy, courage, passion, and purpose in your life. Now let's dive into today's episode and get ready to laugh, learn, and live your life to the fullest. Our guests today are touring New Hampshire-based husband and wife singer-songwriter duo who describe their music as dream-inspired folk. They tap into the imagery captures in dreams, as well as everyday life in crafting their original songs that tell the stories of people and places, real and imagined. The duo got their musical start in New England and now travel throughout the US and Canada in a camper van packed with instruments and sound gear as they bring their music and stories to coffee houses, festivals, libraries, house concerts, and other listening groups. Although professional life led them to abandon their musical pursuits for more than 20 years, a songwriting workshop series with Pete and Maura Kennedy prompted them to return to their musical roots. And they are here today to empower you to be free and follow your dreams, whatever that looks like for you. So, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcoming the husband and wife, Daniel and Faith. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, and hello to all of your podcast viewers.
Yeah. We have been spending a lot of time this last several years out traveling. It's a real privilege to get to see the country and to share our music as we travel.
Yeah, that's really, I would say, that's really a beautiful life that you two have, are building together or have built and continue to build. And so I want to start with your story, your love story, if I may. So let's start with your love story. How did the two of you meet, and how did music eventually become such a big part of your life and relationship?
Go ahead.
Well, we met in college as freshman orientation advisors for the incoming freshman year. He was a senior, I was a sophomore, and we kept getting paired up in the orientation stuff. And
Yeah.
at the end of the orientation week, we were kind of an item, and we have not stopped being an item ever since. So
That was 1982. We got married in 1985, so we're coming up on 40 years. So.
yeah,
Wow.
we were thinking back on it. We actually started our relationship with music because we were listening to a folk singer for our first date.
So
So that was the sign, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and that singer's Kevin McCrell. He's based in the Albany, New York area. His songwriting is one of my songwriting inspirations.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
um, I like the way he tells stories and I like his style. And there are many others who I've encountered over the years that have influenced as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, we met in college. Spent a lot of time then. We both had backgrounds in music. I sung in many choruses and did all kinds of stuff as a kid.
And
And
I was in my high school choir and was the piano accompanist for it for a couple of years. Not because I was a great piano player, but because I was the best one available at the time.
yeah. But college, we went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which is an engineering school.
And it's one of those places where you do a lot of studying to a point where there's no time for music yourself. We went to listen to music, but that's about all we did
Mm.
until about 20 years ago.
Yeah, about 20 years ago, we started listening to actually satellite radio had just started.
Yeah.
Sirius and XM were two separate radio systems, and Sirius had a channel called Folktown that had all these artists who we had missed because we had been away from the scene. Amongst them were Pete and Maura Kennedy, who had a show on that channel, and other artists who we wound up meeting later and really were inspired by, and went from listening to saying, we should get back into doing this. Started songwriting and picked up instruments again and learned how to play them well so that we could get out and share our songs.
Yeah. So you gave up music for over 20 years. So I'm just curious, like what was going on during that season of your life? So what did you do during that season of your life when music is not?
Uh, we both worked in the computer industry. I worked on computer networking. There are bits of technology that make the internet work that I worked on.
Mm.
The Internet Standards Organization, I was heavily involved with things like that. And Faith?
I did large-scale data protection, backup software for data centers and things like that. When we went out and first started touring, we were both still working as well, which is part of why we got the van. This thing's wired as a mobile hotspot so that I could be on phone calls with my teams in India at 8 o'clock in the morning and at midnight, wherever we were. And when we were out on the West Coast, it was 5 o'clock in the morning at 9 o'clock at night. As long as we had
Yeah.
someplace with cellular connectivity, we could still do our jobs. But he's self-employed, has been for 20 some odd years
Yeah.
now, 30 some, maybe 30.
27 or so.
And I worked for larger companies, but I had enlightened management who were okay with my working from the road as
Well,
long as I
working,
got
we were working from home, just home happens to move.
yeah. And they understood, as long as I got my work done, they didn't mind where I did it, so it worked out.
What was the hardest part? If you could go back to that moment, what was the hardest part about going back to your original passion, which is music, right? After giving up for like almost 20 years, that's a long time. Like, what was the hardest part about going back to music industry, and what would you tell, or what advice would you give to others who are thinking about doing the same? Because as music, as you know,
Yeah.
sorry, as musicians, as artists, we all know that it's very tough, to build your own business, to build, to be an artist. So yeah.
Well, the first thing is you're always learning. You're
Yeah.
always a student. This is something we learned from one of the folks we did some classes with over the years, who won national championships for his finger picking, and then went out to a jazz club and realized he had no idea what the guy was doing on stage, and said, it's time for me to be a student again.
Yep.
But you're always a student. There's always more to learn.
And for us, picking up stringed instruments, I had the only stringed instrument I had ever touched before that was a piano, but it's really hard to fit a piano in a van.
Yep.
And I think you had touched guitar briefly,
very briefly,
in
when I was
summer
about 10
camp.
years old,
Yeah.
and then not again until we started songwriting. So then I picked up banjo. I always wanted to play the banjo, and that's in part because part of my story includes hanging out with this banjo player who lived in the Hudson River Valley. You might have heard of, named Pete, and so Pete Seeger and his wife Toshi took me in some when I was in college. I went to their house instead of going home because it was a safer place. I grew up with Pete's music. My mom had seen him when he was blacklisted in the late 50s when she was in college.
He was not allowed to perform in music halls or anything like that, but he was allowed to perform in schools and colleges, which he had no problem with.
But so banjo had always been on my radar as something I wanted to do, and I got my first banjo in 2009, and it was 10 years before I really played it on stage.
Yeah.
What you're doing with your right hand is just so different that it took a long time to get that to just be natural. But I love it, and this new album, Who We Are, is the first one that has banjo on it.
Banjo on it. Yep.
Um,
For me, picking up these different stringed instruments, I don't play guitar because it has too many strings. I tell people I play 4-stringed instruments, or instruments that think they're 4 strings, like mandolins. There are 8 strings, but there's 4 pairs. because I'm only working with I've got 5 fingers, but the thumb is holding things down, and to try to figure out
Right.
there's just too many strings otherwise.
Yeah.
And so I've got the mandolin, the ukulele, the acoustic bass guitar, and I picked up mountain dulcimer as
Yeah.
well, which is I play a 4 string version of that. I'm sure I could come up with half a dozen other instruments that I would love to learn to
Yeah.
play, but we can only fit so many instruments in the
Yeah.
van. So
We do have a house in New Hampshire which has many more instruments. Extra guitars, extra banjo, extra
several
dulcimers.
mandolins, it's a whole bunch of
uh,
ukuleles are small. You can fit a lot. So yeah.
Mandola. Part of the fun of having the extra instruments is what we record at home. We record our parts in our home studio, and we'll be working on a song. It's like, I wonder what this other instrument would sound like on
Yeah.
this track. Would that be
Yeah.
better? And so we have instruments we
So,
can go and
and
grab.
sometimes that instrument makes it onto the next album.
Yep.
So, and it's like your 12 string guitar has never gone on tour with us, but
Nope.
it showed up in recordings.
Yeah.
So
I love that. So yeah, I mean, always be a student and experimenting with different instruments, right? With different type of
oh yeah,
music.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then, well, I was going to say, then you were asking about people getting started.
Yeah.
So the music industry is, especially in the folk world, is a challenge. There's not a lot
there's
of
not a lot
industry
there.
around it, but one of the things that really helps is and it takes some work to find them. There are great open mics everywhere, especially we're songwriters, and there's the open mic that we just featured there a couple weeks ago
Yeah,
in Massachusetts. Some incredible songwriters show up twice a month at this open mic and share new songs that'll knock your socks off. And it's a great place to work on your skills and get comfortable on stage. You will never be 100% relaxed and comfortable on stage. And that's
yeah.
one of the other things to know for a beginner is there's some amount of tension being on stage and playing for people. It's also delightful to share music with
It is.
people,
But
but
the first time you're on stage singing your own song in front of other human beings is terrifying. I have a recording of the very first time I sang one of my own songs on stage, and I played it for my sister, and she told me afterwards that that's an interesting vibrato on your voice. I told her that's not vibrato, that's terror.
it gets better.
It it and the only way to get comfortable doing it is to just do it and do it and do it.
Yeah.
And after a while, it never gets, completely nonchalant. I'm just going to walk on stage and perform. There's always a little bit of a thrill, but the audience is a little different every time, and that's part of the joy.
How do you handle criticism from the audience?
The open mic scene, a good open mic, people will give you encouraging response, and encourage you to come back and work on your craft. And we go to songwriting critique circles, which can be more of what you're suggesting, which is just like you'll get feedback that
Yeah.
says, well, that doesn't really work, or here's why, perhaps, or maybe.
I don't know that I think we've been really lucky. We really haven't found, at least in our folk world, an audience that has given us much criticism.
No. and
We've been lucky.
and occasionally, we'll sing something that has an edge to it or has a political bent to it, and yeah, a few people will walk out. I was really pleased with one of those that we were at and played. I think it was, I don't remember if it was '68.
It was 68.
Song about 1968. Prompt was one's earliest memory, and my earliest memories were pretty tough memories because 1968 was a year of assassinations and whatnot in the country. But we had a few people walk out, but we had a big crowd, and I was pleased with a very mixed audience, the number of people who did not. And people really liked the song. So,
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. But we also know that music can be a powerful tool for change. So, how have you used your song or performances to speak out on social issues or inspire activism in your communities?
Well, the song that has gotten the most attention in that regard
It's
on
a
this new album.
it's a song of mine called "My Name Is George," and it is a duet between a trans boy. I sing the part of the trans boy, a duet with his father, and Dan sings the part of the father. The song starts with George, you know, hiding the fact that he's a boy. You know, everybody knows him as Emily. He knows deep in his heart that he's not Emily, but he doesn't dare tell anyone because he not to get in trouble. He especially doesn't want to tell his father because he knows his father will disown him and toss him out. Dan comes in and starts singing about how he found out sort of by accident he has a son, and the whole thing finishes with the two of them facing each other, and the father telling the son, "I love you and I always will," and there's nothing that can change that. And we wanted to model the kind of reaction that we would hope that any good loving parent would have to a trans child. It's something that matters to us. We have a number of trans friends. After I had written this song and we were performing it out, we discovered that we have a trans cousin. She thankfully is very well loved and supported by the family, but we have trans friends who are not supported by their
Mm-hmm.
families, and we wanted to model this is the way that we think. You know,
Right.
just love each other and love
Yeah.
love people where they're at. We've been performing that song absolutely everywhere. We performed it at every show in Florida. Florida being a place where, they have, don't say gay, don't even think about saying trans. We have yet to have a negative reaction to that
Mm-hmm.
song anywhere we've performed it around the country.
And our approach with this kind of song is to tell a very personal story from the perspective of a person and ease into what the whole story is about. But rather than, we don't hit people over the head with an issue. We will lead them through a personal story, which we hope will melt their heart. And
Or at least open their eyes.
yeah,
Even if they don't necessarily agree with our message, at least to see someone else's viewpoint on it. We think that's really important.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but the two of you, I am, you have been working closely side by side and traveling together, performing together. How do you handle creative differences when it comes to songwriting or performing? Do you have a rule or a ritual, or who is the boss, that helps you navigate?
Well, when we first got started, we could not critique each other's songs because we couldn't go there. It was not pretty. But then we went to enough critique circles with other songwriters that we got used to how to handle feedback,
Mm,
uh, giving and receiving.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we've been working on one of my newest songs right now. We've taken it to two different critique circles, gotten some fabulous feedback. And then over the last week or so, we've been sitting down playing through it, and Dan's been saying,
It's like, yeah, that
"Yeah,
doesn't that
yeah, change that you to a we,
make it
and
more
and
inclusive.
and could sort of drop that word over there." And we tell people when we write with Kate Campbell on our right shoulder, telling us, tell the story, because she's always very big on story songs and getting the story across out of the music. And then we have Cliff Eberhard over on our left shoulder saying, you don't need that many words to tell it. Trim it down and bring it down to the essence of the story.
And we have done workshops with both of them, bringing our
Yeah.
songs to circles that they were leading and have them give feedback and suggestions and stuff. So,
And it's wonderful.
but they're both fabulous singer-songwriters and performers
And mentors.
and mentors, and they and many others have helped us through the years how to craft better songs.
Yeah.
We actually are really pretty good at
Doing it for ourselves.
doing it for each other.
And
So
he's after me all the time. I am very wordy in my original songs, And I lovingly refer to him as the machete bearer, who comes in with the machete and trims out all of the stuff that is not needed in the song. It really helps tighten things up,
Hmm.
and we end up with songs that we're really proud of.
And I find it really interesting how few words you can use at times to convey exactly what you mean, and leave space as well for the audience to read their own stories
Mm-hmm.
into what you're singing. We have a
Yes.
song Faith wrote years and years ago. We put a new version of it on this album for her grandmother. And it's a very personal song about her
Yeah.
grandmother. And after we play that song, people come up and tell us about their grandmother. It's connected them to their own roots. That was a really interesting lesson about the fact that
Yeah.
you can tell something that's so personal to you, and yet people will
Mm.
completely connect to it.
And I years ago, a song that I had sent a copy of it to a friend in our Tai Chi class. And because I had told her a little bit about the song, and she said she might be interested, I sent her a copy. And the next time we saw her, she said, I listened to your song the first time, and my immediate reaction was, oh my God, you wrote this song for me. And then I listened to it a second time and realized, oh my God, this is the most generic song I've ever heard. But the first time she heard it, it just
It
touched
just
something in
connected, yeah.
her that connected to, and she was just blown away at how I had just captured something in her life.
Hmm.
And it was afterwards she realized it was just her reading it into it.
But
So,
that's great. I mean, that's like,
yeah.
forming that connection is great. And the another song that we're singing a lot right now is "Se Llama Juanita," and it's a story that I made up about a migrant coming to the southern border and why. That one has, it's telling her story and her family coming to the border, but in the bridge it also says why. And the U.S. did a lot of damage to Central American countries and the governments there, and it's on us. Once I've led them into the story about this person who's having to run away because somebody's taken their land away,
And has been threatening them. Yeah.
and but then to say, hey, by the way, it's our fault. I mean, not us personally necessarily, but our country's fault that this is happening. And so, when you're busy claiming that they're here illegally or whatever, it's like you might want to consider why that happened. What's the backstory? You know,
And with a lot of these songs, we will sing them and then we'll talk about the background of the song meaning. And with that particular one, we talk about the fact that the way a person applies for asylum anywhere in the world, but it is the international law that in order to ask for asylum from a country, you must set foot on sovereign soil. And so these folks who are coming to the southern border and crossing over and asking for asylum, that's how you do it.
that's legal.
And it's 100% legal to do it
So,
that way. And so we'll sing the song, we'll tell a little bit about where it came from, and then we point
mhm.
that out to people. And a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
So it
So,
allows us to educate people as well
right.
as open their eyes.
And and that song originally was first person. It was sung as a guy coming to the border, and it didn't work well for me. I didn't like the way it was originally Mi nombre Jorge. It actually came from the same prompt that my name is George.
The song prompt was "My name is George."
So Faith
Both got
wrote,
very different songs out of it.
but so mine it didn't work well. And Joe Jenks, who produced our new album, he spent 8 days with us back in April of 2023, workshopping the songs that would ultimately be considered for the album. And one morning, I got up before Faith and before Joe, was looking at the lyrics for this song and said, something's been bothering me. And I rewrote it, and everybody came downstairs and I sang the new version. And then Joe, he gets co-write on that one because I had all the material for the bridge, but hadn't figured out what to do with it and how to end the song. He was the one who
He
came up
helped
with
pull that
the
together.
ideas for how to pull the tail end of that together,
Yep.
and just really made a huge difference for how that one came out. And being open to that level of collaboration, it's an interesting thing. And our songs are our children, We don't have biological children. We have songs that we've created, and it's really interesting to see where they go in the world. It's a personal thing, and you submit a song for a song contest, and you get no comments back, or you get harsh critique back, and that hurts. It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, and it's really inspiring and beautiful to witness the two of you, like just how you interact with each other and how then you look at faith. I mean, that's really true love, I must say. And so, for my listeners who are husband and wife, or in a relationship, and you guys have been married for almost like 30, 40 years, right?
Coming up on 40
It'll be
years.
40
40
Yeah.
years in
years.
November.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to know about like what is a secret, basically, what keeps your relationship going strong, not just as artists, but as partners in life.
Mm. We do a lot of things together.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
We
problem. Could be
well,
a problem, right?
it can, but
Yeah.
we've done a lot of things. We spent many years scuba diving. That fell by the wayside because music took over our lives. But
Yeah.
we have done hundreds of dives in the Caribbean, off of the east coast of New England.
And
Um,
that one happened because he was over at the local swimming pool, and
I was swimming laps,
he
and
was swimming laps, and they were doing a intro to scuba diving. Come try out the equipment at the other end of the pool, and he came home and said, "Oh, this was so cool. We should go do this." And
Right.
after I drank down half of the swimming pool, I finally figured out how not to do that anymore, and we started diving.
yeah, we
Um,
had friends from college who actually had built their own company, which they then sold and then moved to Bonaire, which is an island in the southern Caribbean off the coast of Venezuela. And so we would go down to visit them like 2 or 3 times a year and go diving with them. Um, and yeah, so that was one of the many things we've done together.
yeah.
So you don't just do music together, but you do many other things, like
Hmm.
have a personal life outside of music, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We
And actually for a couple of years I actually worked for him too. That was kind of scary.
Yeah, my little company was never really intended to keep us fed, but
Yeah,
in 2008, when the economy
I got
crashed,
laid off at the tail end of 2008 and could not for the life of me even get an interview for 2 years, and he finally said, quit sitting around feeling sorry for yourself. I need help with my business. So I worked for him for 2 years, and
but yeah, so
yeah.
we make it work. One of the things we do every day, we do at least a half hour of walk or hike or something more if we can, but that's sort of a baseline. So when we're out on the road, there's a great park with beautiful trails along Lake Erie in Ohio. And if we're going that direction, well, that's one of the places we stop for 45
Yep.
minutes. We'll stop there, go for a walk, and there's another one down in, I think, Virginia
Somewhere in
somewhere.
Virginia,
But
James Madison University, right near
it's
there. There's
near,
a fabulous park,
but
and
we've identified all these great little places all over the country as we travel. And if we're in a new area, while Faith's driving, I'll be hunting for some place that we can go
where
walk
can
or
we go?
hike. It's important for us to get physical activity, but it's also a time when we can be away from the computers and away from the phones and just go explore
And just
somewhere.
for us, I mean, when I was growing up, my parents and I, every February we would go to Florida to visit my grandmother, and then every August we would go somewhere else. And that somewhere else was, some years it was going to the ocean, some years it was to the mountains, but it was pretty much a different place every year. And so by the time I graduated high school, I'd been to over half the states in the United States. And there are some places that I remember so fondly that I want to go back
Yeah.
to, and some places that I had never made it to that I want to go to. And he did not have that background.
So where we are in Western Massachusetts, we're actually at a cabin that my dad built. He started building it when I was 2 years old, and both my parents are long gone. So we take care of the place, and we're down here doing a little bit of work on it this weekend or
Plumbing.
this week. Yeah, plumbing, which is not fun. But but we would always come here when I was a kid. The house was always getting built or worked on or whatever, or summers we'd be in this area. So I didn't see the country. The furthest west I had been when I graduated college was central Pennsylvania. I had been to Europe once, but had not been west at all. And once I graduated and was working in the computer industry, I got sent all over the country and to Europe.
But then,
But
even then, he would fly there. He'd see the hotel
Yeah.
and some conference
Yeah.
rooms and a restaurant, and
and
then
you
fly home again.
never saw the country, never saw the places. And so as we're traveling, one of the real joys for me is to be able to play our music, but in between the days when we're not playing, especially, is to get to see the country.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, we were going to be out in New Mexico and Texas and a number of other places. And on the way west, we were playing in a few places, but we had one gig fall through, which opened up a couple days. And I'm looking at the schedule. It's like we could get a couple days in the Badlands,
Which is one of the places I've been trying to get back to since I was a kid.
and it was amazing. It was a delightful couple days that we got to do some hiking, got to see a bison about 10 feet from the van, uh, got to see prairie dogs, just all kinds of interesting critters.
And now he understands why I've been wanting to get
Yeah.
back there for,
Yeah.
40, 50 years.
So we try really hard to make our travels include seeing places, and sometimes those are we were on the east side of the Sierra. We'd camped in Independence, California, on the east side of the Sierra Nevada, and it's desert, and it's really interesting to look up because we had crossed the Sierra on California 88, which they keep open through the winter. And snowbanks are 30 feet high on either side of the road. We cross over, and now we're on the east side of the Sierra, and it's desert, and you could see the glacier up on top of the mountains. And it was just beautiful. And I was messaging with a friend who lives up in Davis area, and she said, well, you're going to go to Manzanar. And I had to look up what that was. We were 10 minutes from Manzanar. It was one of the camps that Japanese Americans were sent to in World War II. And I'm working on a new piece about that. It's a sad tale, and it's a sad time in our country that this happened, and the government perpetrated this on its own citizens. But that was one of the most meaningful places that we visited on that whole tour, and that was a coast to coast.
As he said, he's working on a new song from that, and sometimes in our travels, we find ideas for songs. We were down in the Everglades a few years ago. It was in the middle of February. We do this crazy thing the last couple of years called February Album Writing Month. And the idea for that is to write 14 songs in the 28 days of February.
Wow.
Write an album's worth of songs.
Which, yes, that's just as crazy as it sounds. And the first year that we did this, we were on tour in Florida. We left about halfway through the month. We'd gone to an open mic in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a week before we were opening for another act at the same place in Miami. And as long as we were in the neighborhood, we went out into the Everglades. And we're at a campground in the Everglades. There's a central lake. There's a ring of grass around the lake. There's a road around that. And then the campsites are spokes off of that road. And I'm sitting under a palm tree in our site. Perfectly lovely afternoon, beautiful breeze, nice warm temperatures, snowing at home. I'm enjoying the fact that I'm nice and warm and I'm wearing shorts. And I fell asleep. And when I woke up, the alligator that had been swimming around in the lake was now on the grass at the edge of the lake across the road from our campsite. And he had to have been at least 8 feet long. He was huge.
Wow.
And so I texted Dan, get your camera, because Dan's also a fine art photographer and does a lot of nature photography, and, well, nature had just arrived. And I grabbed my chair and started backing up. Dan got some very nice shots of him, and then the alligator slowly started walking toward us. And we backed up until we were right in the doorway of the van.
And he walked through our campsite.
He walked through our campsite 10 feet away from us.
And off into the woods.
And afterwards, once we were sure that he was off into the woods and wasn't going to be coming back to eat us or anything, I decided that, well, if he was going to go to all the trouble of walking through our campsite, the least I could do is write a song about him. And so I wrote this silly little song called Gator Gator.
Not recorded
That
yet.
one.
Yeah,
We've played it live a bunch of times
yeah,
though.
it's actually we've been playing it as our encore for a couple of shows recently, and it's a ton of fun for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, as long as song ideas want to wander through our campsite, I'm going to write about them.
Yes, ideas are everywhere. Thank you so much. It was so fun to have the two of you on the show, and all the stories, all the insights, and even all the music that you have shared with me and my listeners today. Thank you so much for coming. Now tell my people where they can find your music and connect with you too.
So the simplest place to start is our website, danandfaith.com. So DANANDFAITH.com. You can't use ampersands on
In
domain names.
domain names.
From there, we do have links there to our YouTube and Facebook, Spotify, Bandcamp. All of our music is available on Bandcamp, but everything's on Spotify and Apple Music and every other streaming service. The new album, one of the things about it that we really are proud of is rather than a normal CD jacket, because a lot of people don't have CD players anymore,
Yeah, they don't
we
even know what
have
CD player anymore. They don't know.
well, yeah.
Yeah.
So what we put together is a book. It's a 70-page paperback that is the size of a CD jacket. So it fits in a DJ's rack, and it fits in somebody's home rack of CD if they like those. But it has the lyrics in readable font,
Yeah.
the backstories, and then photos and drawings
Ah,
to go with each song. So that's basically like liner notes that you'd have seen in LPs,
Yep.
decades ago.
Yeah.
That's become an interesting addition to this album.
Yeah, and if they have a CD player and want a copy of the CD, we tuck one in the back. If they want a download code, we'll tuck a download code in there. And if they're going to listen to it on Spotify, now they have all the liner notes for it.
Yeah. So it provides this really nice accompaniment for the. It's an extra incentive for people to consider buying the album as such. They're buying the liner notes really more
Yeah.
than the music is then available on every platform.
Yeah, and we also have a Patreon page, which you'll also find a link to that from our website. And for that, we've started putting sort of rough copies of some of our newest songs on there recently.
A story about where the song came from and what inspired it. I just put up one last week that was about the town. It's really the village of Bellows Falls, Vermont. It's a little town that was once an industrial town and is now really an arts town, and it's near where we live. But it had an interesting history, and so I wrote a song about the town, and we've sung it in that town.
We have.
But so I took the recording of that and put that up, but also talked about the history of the place, and some things like this have an educational content as well, and that's all good. I like people to learn about the people and places that we encounter, and some of the stories are made up and some are about real people, so
And places.
and real places.
yeah, real stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not just imagine. Yeah. So thank you so much again. And thanks for bringing the CD and CD player back. We really love that concept. Now, guys, go follow them, subscribe to their YouTube channel and Spotify, and keep yourself updated on all the amazing things they are doing. I'll put their website and all the links in the show note below. And make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode coming to you every Wednesday. And I will always leave you the same as I leave you with every other episode. Show up, the world needs you and you need you. Thanks for listening, and I wish you all a joyful and amazing day ahead. Bye. Thank you again for tuning into Find Joy Joyan podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, take a screenshot and share it on your IG story and take Find Joy Joyan _podcast so I know you are listening. And leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already done so. And remember to hit the subscribe button whether you are listening on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, or any of your other favorite platforms. If you love what we are doing and want to become one of our sponsors, you can send me a DM to connect. And thanks for being here. I will see you soon in the next episode.